pay skills to retain people, and that's where you start. Because Perry is leaving us, as you know, in a huge budget hole. He took over $12 billion of stimulus funds while blasting his political opponent for voting for him. He did. All of it had strings attached to it. I mean, every highway project ever built in the state of Texas, big highways had federal funds, they've all had strings attached to it. He only refuses to compete for the federal funds that would either help unemployed people or help the schools. The rest of it he takes. It all has strings. And this race for the top grant, let your voice be heard and known. Go to the website, look at the blog. You will see the people and who you can contact to urge. I was going to say members of the legislature ought to hear from Texans that we're not afraid to compete for federal grants that we can use to improve our schools, improve the professional development. We have states like Georgia and Louisiana and other states. Perry lauds the governors as, being his model for fed governors. They compete for these funds, the race for the top funds. In the next round of grants, we ought to be, our application is due as a state for some of those grants that can help free up some of those resources on June 1. And so there ought to be a public outcry that we ought to be, and it doesn't require, that you do not have to agree to national standards. That's false. True or false test. Do you have to agree to national standards to compete for a race for a top fund? Answer, false. The grant application is on our website. Take a look at it. Yes, sir. Back in the back there.
As you know, the Lubbock area has been very influential in the past in redistricting.
Yeah.
And recently our representative who helped with redistricting was replaced by an extremist radical right-wing person. Can you pledge to us that as governor, even though we're Republican, a lot of people out here are Republican, can you pledge to us that you will help give West Texas a fair districting, even though we have sent a person with no influence to Austin to replace the person with influence? We're gonna need a fair break out here. Can you say that you will help us fairly when you're governor to get good redistricting in our area?
I'll tell you what the redistricting ought to be. We ought to have districts that are don't break up a community. We ought to have districts that don't look like reptiles. We ought to have districts that are not designed to elect or defeat any particular person. We ought to have districts when it comes to Congress. Most states and most times, in the interest of the public of the state, when they have a growth in congressional seats, they don't put two incumbents in the same district because they don't want to lose the seniority. And that's true of states with people from all parties. But the governor has very limited power in the district, and I have to say that, so I don't want to make a commitment. You can veto a bill, but it goes to the legislative redistricting board, so I can't tell you that I can ensure a particular outcome. What I can say is I'm going to articulate those principles. And I will tell you this, that when the tide turns and when people understand that we need to prepare our citizens, and if our state turns, so we have sweeps on the Democratic side instead of the Republican side. As a former party chair, and at that time as a current or former governor, I will say to the Democratic Party, you do the same thing. Okay? You do the same thing. You don't gerrymander just to protect individuals, and you don't break up communities of interest to get an outcome.